Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
Most people on the street looked up when I drove by. They were attracted by the loud noise, sounding like a big, angry bear on energy drinks. My customized exhaust made it clear that my black 2021 Phantom XT 6.2L was nearby. Passers-by had different reactions. Most smiled because they admired what they saw as a fantastic car, which was my favorite vehicle ever. A few people even stopped and stared in amazement. These were the true fans, like me, who understood the appeal. Only a handful frowned as they watched me go. They either didn't like how loud my car was or were envious of owners of other cars like Peregrine and Revere. I parked the car and locked it. I was going to a small shop early on Sunday afternoon. I had just finished my morning run and then did some yard work by myself, which was unusual because I usually never did things alone outside of work. But my wife Olivia had a special customer who was getting married that afternoon, so she decided to make an exception to her usual rule of not being apart on weekends. Life had a way of moving at a speed that was either ridiculously fast or ridiculously slow depending on the situation. If your heart is broken and just being alive is painful, then a year seems to last several centuries, with each month, each week, each day, and every minute seemingly stretching to infinity. On the other hand, when you're happy and in love, days seem to pass so quickly that a week goes by in only seconds, your brain scrambling to remember each precious detail as time accelerates into your future. Over the past 4 years, I'd had one of each: 1 year of absolute agony followed by 2 of absolute bliss. I'd been so busy concentrating on the bliss that I had almost forgotten what weekend this was. I laughed when I thought about it because, for much of my life, this had been the most important weekend of any year for me. It wasn't my birthday, it wasn't Easter. For me and most of my family, this weekend, the annual California State vs. NYU football game, was the best weekend of any year. It had the potential to be either blissfully nirvanic or heart-wrenchingly bitter. It all depended on who won that game. The alumni of both schools lived for their schools, and the rivalry only became more heated as the years went on. After dedicating my life for so long to that rivalry, it struck me as almost funny that this year, only hours before the game, not only was I not going, but I had no idea that the game was even happening. And God help me, I really didn't care. I guess I'd been so preoccupied with 1,000 other, far more important details that I didn't consider a game I wasn't playing in important. As a matter of fact, I was now a Eagles fan and was looking forward to seeing them play in Paris, Germany the next morning. Somehow, I had failed to notice the brightly colored green and gold banners strung up all over town. In fact, it was hearing an interview on the radio as I drove to the shop a few moments ago that reminded me of the game. NYU's coach, Ethan Clark, was being interviewed. I didn't bother listening to the interview. I actually didn't care what Randy had to say. I changed the station and listened to some music. As I got out of the car, looking toward the shop, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, San Diego man." I turned and saw my dad's best friend, Greg, bearing down on me. The older, balding man caught up to me and vigorously shook my hand as if he were operating one of those antique manual water pumps. "Long time no see," he yelled. The man had always spoken so loudly that it made me wonder whether or not he had a hearing loss. "It really has been, Mr. Collins," I said. "Are you watching the game on the giant screen TV in the bar down the block?" he asked. "I am, too," he said before I could answer. Beats the hell out of trying to get out of that crowded stadium, especially if they lose. And things don't look good for California State this year. "Hey, why aren't you wearing your swag?" He looked me over closely, clearly surprised that I didn't have a single piece of California State clothing on. "Oh my God," he said, "don't tell me the cute little NYU girl you married has converted you. Say it ain't so. NYU sex can't be that good. Step out of the dark side, son, come back to the light. Your father must be ashamed of you." "No, Mr. Collins, I haven't gone over to the other side," I said. "I actually don't have a side at all. I don't even follow college basketball anymore. I'm over 35 years old, I've been out of college for 12 years, and watching a bunch of 19-year-old kids playing football is no longer a defining part of my life. I guess I've grown up." "The hell you say," he spat. "That NYU has corrupted you. I'll pray for your soul, son. I don't want you to go to hell with the NYUs." He was holding his hands up with both index fingers crossed as if he were warding off a vampire. He cocked his head to the side and looked at me with one eye partially closed and the other open widely, as if he were closely scrutinizing me to see if whatever had infected me was visible with the naked eye. I looked at my watch and realized I had a few moments to talk to him. "Okay, Mr. Collins, I'll tell you my story," I said. "As you probably know, I met Sophia 10 years ago. I had just been hired by my company as a CNC programmer, and Sophia was doing sales for a company that sold carbide inserts for machine tools. So my boss sent her over to me so I could look through her wares to see if she had anything we could use. We hit it off immediately. Somewhere in that first conversation, she stopped trying to sell me inserts and actually told me that her company's products were inferior to what I was already using. I think we both knew that we were on the fast track to a relationship. Both of us were freshly out of school and trying to make a big splash in our chosen career fields. I asked her to dinner that evening, and she accepted. That dinner led to others, and after a few weeks, we were in love. A few weeks after that, I asked her to marry me, and she accepted. We were both excited and walking around on a cloud of love. I didn't realize at the time that we were headed for trouble. I had told my parents about Sophia, and they were dying to meet her. The first available weekend that I could get everyone together was the California State vs. NYU weekend. I had only told Sophia that my family went all out for the game every year, we tailgate, and went to every game. Sophia and I had never really discussed which colleges we'd attended, and I can see now that it might have been a mistake. Sophia had only told me that she was excited about meeting my parents and planning our life together. Her parents had already passed at that point, and she really wanted to be part of a family again. When I picked Sophia up on the morning of the game, I went into shock. Sophia was wearing silver. It was worse than that, she was wearing an official NYU Knights jersey. It turned out that one of her former boyfriends had been a wide receiver for NYU. My heart was ripped in two. I stood there without saying a word, just looking at her. Sophia has short blonde hair and enormous green eyes. She's tall and thin, with long legs. I was torn that morning between walking away and grabbing her under her jersey. She wore a black long-sleeve t-shirt and black leggings. Maybe it was tribal, I was feeling what the caveman must have felt like when he encountered a female from another closely related species. The drive to spread your seed and make your tribe the dominant species is hardwired into us. I wanted to take her right there and put a panther in her womb. She looked at me with equal shock. I was decked out in full California State regalia, I even had my face painted. "Oh," she said, looking at me as if she had never really seen me. "Exactly," I replied. Things were going so well. After staring at each other for a very long time and doing a lot of head shaking, we drove out to my parents' house anyway. To say that the day was shocking was an understatement. My parents were shocked. My mother got over it and accepted Sophia. She was sure that over time, Sophia would see the light. My dad, on the other hand, took me to the side and told me to break up with her. "Son, those mixed marriages just don't work," he said. When I told him that I wasn't going to give her up and that I intended to marry her, he had a fit. He started cursing and calling both me and Sophia names. He told me that until I saw reason, I was no longer welcome in his house. To make a long story short, Sophia and I got married, and I haven't spoken to my dad since then. My mom has to sneak and visit me, but it didn't matter at all because I loved Sophia so much that as long as we were together, I was happy. Our marriage was great, we loved each other fiercely. The school thing was only ever a factor one weekend a year. The rest of the time, it fell more along the lines of good-natured rivalry. Early on, we stopped going to the games. That was mostly because Sophia didn't feel comfortable in the stadium, and there was absolutely no way I was going to step one foot in Knights Stadium. So what we tended to do was hold a party for the game every year. Every year, the party was bigger and more fun. We bought a 85-inch ultra-high-def screen, it was the best, biggest, and clearest set available when we bought it. We had the best setup, and every year we spent more on food, snacks, and liquor. Some years we had to beg everyone to take food home because there was no way the two of us could make a dent in what was left over. And every year we invited more and more people. There was always a friendly rivalry going on, all of the California State people stayed on one side of the living room, and all of the NYU sat on the other. What most of the guests didn't know was that Sophia and I made all kinds of bets during the game. The prize was usually 3 minutes. If California State scored, Sophia would look around and say, "Honey, we need some more chips. Can you grab some from the basement?" I would smile or nod, and she'd say, "I'll go with you." As soon as we got into the basement, she would drop to her knees and give me a BJ. The problem was that after exactly 3 minutes, she would stop. It was the same if NYU scored. We went to the basement or our bedroom, and I had to do the same. Field goals were worth 1 minute. The problem was that if it was a high-scoring game, both of us would be in a constant state of arousal for the entire game. One of the rules was that we couldn't finish until the game was over. Usually, by the end of the third quarter, we were both so ready for sex that we didn't care who scored as long as someone did. By the third year of the party, Sophia and I started disappearing immediately after the game. The Knights won that year with a last-second field goal. Sophia grabbed my hand and dragged me upstairs. "Don't break anything, and don't come up here," she yelled over her shoulder to our remaining guests. I don't think there was any doubt about what we were going upstairs to do. Everything changed, though, in year 5. A woman named Olivia Mills started working for Sophia's company. She had graduated the same year as Sophia, and they both majored in business. The difference was that Olivia had graduated from California State, and Sophia had graduated from NYU. Sophia was a salesperson, Olivia was an office specialist. Within 8 months of being hired, Olivia was Sophia's supervisor. It burned Sophia up. She complained on a daily basis about a bias towards California State grads. As a way of showing her frustration, Sophia became almost militantly Knights. She almost lost it when I told her that I had invited Olivia to our party. But I was the one who ended up shocked. On the day of the game, I went to the door. A guy I didn't recognize was standing there. He smiled at me, and I noticed he was wearing a Knights jersey. I knew that jersey really well. It was the same one Sophia always wore. As the guy stood there smiling, I asked him, "Are you a Rams fan too?" Personally, I think the guy is an a-hole. He smirked. At that moment, I heard my wife shriek. She ran out of the living room and into the doorway where I stood. "Logan Carter!" She screamed. She hugged him. She actually hugged the maggot right in front of me. Then she linked arms with him and took him into the house to introduce him to everyone. Years after school hadn't been good for him. He was still taller than me, but he had the beginnings of a beer gut. He also had a slight limp, and the mullet hairstyle he wore was just funny. But Sophia acted like the a-hole was Tom Brady. I avoided her every time she tried to bring him over to introduce him to me. And instead of circulating throughout our guests, regardless of school or affiliation, the way I normally did, I stayed on the California State side and let Sophia handle the Knights fans. We were in the kitchen a little before the game actually started, and she came up behind me and tried to hug me. I moved away from her like she was on fire. Her eyes narrowed. "Sorry, I didn't know it was you behind me," I said. She just nodded. Before she could say anything, I left the kitchen carrying another tray of snacks out. Most of the people on both sides who had been to our parties before were whispering. They were also smiling and pointing at Sophia and me. When the game started, the whispering and the smiles increased. Neither team scored during the first quarter, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation going throughout the house. I noticed that Carter seemed to stay within a few inches of Sophia the whole time and that she was constantly watching me. For some reason, maybe she just wanted to see whether or not I was watching her and her old boyfriend. Early in the second quarter, NYU marched down the field. They got into the red zone, and everyone on both sides of the living room was smiling. I saw money exchange hands, which didn't make much sense to me. I didn't want to see NYU score, and I was already pissed about Sophia inviting her old boyfriend, so I went down to the basement to get another case of beer. From the way I was feeling, I needed one. I might have drunk the entire case myself. While I was away, apparently California State had intercepted the ball and was taking it the other way down the field. They didn't get into the red zone. That Knights defense was too tough that year. They just had to keep pounding away at them until later in the game when they began to break down. But California State did get into field goal range. They lined up and booted the ball through the uprights. California State was on the scoreboard. There was a huge scream going through the house from both sides of the living room. I was confused. Why the hell were the NYU fans cheering for a California State field goal? Then Sophia extricated herself from talking to her ex. I heard a bunch of giggling from several people at the party. "Honey, we need more beer," she said. "Can you get some from the basement?" A bunch more people started giggling. "I'll go she began. I went down in the basement and brought up another case. "Already," I said, cutting her off. "I put it on ice in the big cooler in the kitchen. If anyone wants a cold one, they can just grab 1 or 3. Her face fell. "What the hell," said one partygoer as he dejectedly handed over a handful of bills to another guy. "Rick, can I see you in the kitchen, honey?" asked Sophia. "Sweetheart, whatever it is can wait until after the party," I said. It would be rude to abandon our guests. She just looked at me in confusion. She was about to say something when, behind us on the screen, NYU scored a touchdown. The Knights fans started cheering, and the California State fans all groaned, but at the same time, they were all watching us. Carter came over and stood next to Sophia. "Great party," he said, smiling. "We didn't actually meet before." I walked away before he could finish. For the rest of the afternoon, everyone ate, watched the game, and had a good time. When the game ended with NYU winning, the Knights fans were happy. The California State fans were split, with half of them being pissed and the rest wanting to string Ethan Clark up. They showed an interview with him after the game where he spouted a lot of off-the-cuff sound bites that made little or no sense and were usually not related to the question. Those little statements were known as Maysisms. "Coach, why do you think your team lost today?" he was asked. "We didn't exactly lose," he said. "The other team just managed to score more points. But on a moral level, I'd consider our performance a victory. This is San Diego. Your defense at times looked to have more holes in it than a piece of Swiss cheese. How do you respond to that?" "Those were designed holes," spouted Randy. "They were designed to look like holes, but they weren't. But the opposing players ran through those holes and scored," said the reporter. "This is San Diego," said Randy. "I am so proud of those young men." "But coach, you lost," said the reporter, cutting him off. "We were victorious in defeat," said Randy. "I already know," quipped the reporter, who was clearly getting pissed. "It's San Diego. Your team is from San Diego. The other team is from San Diego. There are 7 or 8 college basketball teams from this state, and they're all from San Diego. Can I get a straight answer from you?" The cameraman had to intervene and pull the reporter away from the coach before there was a fight. Carter got up and started singing the NYU fight song. Sophia sang along, half-heartedly. Carter took her hand and raised it up like they were cheering together. I was too pissed off to stay in the house. I grabbed my keys from the counter and left through the back door. Except for Sophia, my pride and joy was my midnight dominator. The rims and all of the trim were a metallic bronze color called Harvest. It was what the local tribes in our area called fall maize. My car had a vanity plate, UWIN, and it made me smile whenever I saw it. But that afternoon, I didn't care what the car looked like, I just needed to get away. For the first time since I'd met her, I just needed to be as far away from Sophia and everything else as I could get. I was really hurting. I had no idea why she'd invited that a-hole to our house. It was well into the evening before I got back to the house. Sophia was already angry at me and started on me as soon as I walked in the door. "Where the hell were you?" she asked. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" "Well, I was in the car, and my phone is still upstairs in the bedroom," I said. "My arm isn't long enough to answer it from wherever I was." She just looked at me. "This could have been the best party we ever had," she said. "Everyone was ready to just go crazy." "What happened?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said. "Rick, I found out something today," she began. "Yeah, I already know," I spat. "You still have the hots for your ex?" Her hand went up and covered her mouth. "What the hell made you think something as ridiculous as that?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "I'm going to bed." "No, you're not," she said. "Answer my question." "For starters, you didn't even tell me that you had invited him," I said. He just showed up. It was like getting stabbed. You mean like when you invited Olivia, knowing I can't stand her, she quipped. I invited Olivia right in front of you, I said, and I did it for you. How the hell is inviting a woman I can't stand to our house doing something for me, she said. Because Olivia is technically your boss, I said. I did it to break the tension between you two so you could feel more comfortable at work, so she could look at you in a more friendly light, and give you better assignments, which would lead to you advancing further and faster in your job. Oh, she said suddenly. And Olivia barely said a word to me all night because she was too busy having fun with the guy she brought with her. I think he was her husband. Olivia didn't spend the entire party hanging all over me like I was her date. Her eyes got big as she thought about it. Sophia, how many of the people at the party tonight arrived solo? I asked. She looked as if she were thinking about it. We invited 3 or 4 single women that you work with, I said. They came in a group and arrived together. The only person who came here alone was your a-hole ex. And instead of taking his pick of those 3 or 4 single women, he chose to spend all of his time with you. But he didn't know any of them, she said. Sophia, he didn't know anyone here until he got here, but that didn't stop him from gathering them all together to brag about the things he did when he played football for good old NYU, I said. By the time I left, people from both schools were leaving just so they didn't have to listen to his garbage. She clearly wanted to change the subject. Honey, I found out something tonight, she said. Yeah, I know. You should have married Carter, I spat. She looked at me angrily. I found out that you and I aren't as smart as we thought. Most of the people at the party know about our little secret. Did you know that a lot of them were betting on how long it would take us to sneak away together? I just looked at her. They were all waiting for me to take you off to the basement. Some of them even listened through the heating vents. Laura told me that she and her boyfriend were so horny after listening to us last year that they forgot the condoms when they got home after our party, and she ended up pregnant. Her 2-month-old son is named after us. I was shocked, but I was still pissed at her. Why didn't you take the hint when I wanted to go to the basement, she asked. Your team had scored fair and square. I wanted to get down there on my knees and do my duty. Of course, you'd have done a lot more to me over the course of the game because NYU beat your team's butt. Why didn't you just take Carter to the basement? I asked. He was hanging all over you the whole time. He was always touching you or right up in your face. You barely even knew I was there. I barely even knew that he was there, dummy. I spent the entire time watching you. I wanted you so badly, I could barely keep my knees together the whole first quarter. I didn't even care who scored as long as we could. It took a few days, but we eventually got over our spat, or at least I tried to. The problem was that trust is something that doesn't come easily to me, and every time I tried to put it behind us, something came up. A few weeks later, the day before New Year's Eve to be exact, I went to the door and found Carter standing there with a big bouquet of roses. I literally slammed the door in his face so hard that the wood around the door frame cracked. Sophia heard the noise and came out of the kitchen. What? She began. It's for you, I said. She just looked at me in confusion and tried to open the door. The door was wedged so tightly in the frame that she had to struggle to open it. Once she got the door open, I couldn't help but notice Carter on the ground and roses strewn all around him. She went out and helped him up, then she collected all of the flowers together. A few minutes later, she brought him into the house. Rick, you owe him an apology, she said. He stood there with a smug look on his face. Never going to happen, I said. Do you realize how stupid you're acting, she asked. Do you know how stupid it is for a man to give flowers to a supposedly married woman? I asked. Oh wait, maybe you don't, you graduated from NYU. Sorry, you probably didn't know. They were both pissed, but it still didn't wipe the smug look off of his face. Nathan, it's not what you think, she said. He just gave me the flowers out of gratitude. He's been going through some tough times, and I got him a job with our company. Wow. You'd think with his degree and his history as a football hero, he'd be able to get his own job, I said. Why isn't he playing in the NFL? I got hurt my last year at NYU, he said, and I really didn't concentrate on class while I was there. Most of my focus was on sports. So they gave you a goddamn degree just for fun, I said. Just when I think that school can't get any dumber. I just left the room and went to the garage. Needless to say, New Year's Eve wasn't thankful, and Sophia wasn't very giving. She was pissed off about the things I'd said about her school, and for more than 2 weeks, we barely spoke to each other. Then, out of the blue, she came over and hugged me. "Rick, it took me a while to figure this out," she said. "You're jealous of him, aren't you?" I didn't say anything. Why the hell would you be jealous of him? I love you, Rick. I married you, not him. He never even asked me to marry him, actually. He and I didn't even go out for that long, she said. I'm just trying to help him because we were schoolmates. Whatever, I said. I just walked away because I wasn't in the mood to hear about all of her reasons for justifying the fact that she was spending time with Carter. In December, we found out that there was a good chance the Knights, who were having a great year, might go to the Rose Bowl. "Rick, can we have a party?" she asked. "Maybe we can make up for the last one." "It's your team," I said. "You don't have to ask me to have a party." To this day, I wish that I had said no. I helped her make the arrangements, I helped her buy food, and I even helped her set everything up. But I knew from the beginning that it was going to suck. There was no way I was going to cheer for the Knights, no matter who they played. I was automatically rooting for the other side. "That works for me," she said. "We'll be going by the usual rules then, only you'll be rooting against the Knights instead of for California State. And I expect to spend a lot of time in the basement, Rick. I don't care if they know what we do down there." Our sex life had been off, and I was as horny as a billy goat. I was right with her on that fact. I hoped that the party could somehow jumpstart us back to where we'd been. All the way up until I opened the door and saw Carter standing there. "Hey, guy, no hard feelings," he said. I went into the house, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the garage. "Where are you going?" asked Sophia. "Does it matter?" I said. "Carter is here. You'll do fine." Less than a minute later, I was in my car and on the road. I didn't want to be at a Knights party anyway, I was only doing it for her. I just didn't understand why she couldn't see that Carter was the reason for all of the problems we'd been having. The California State vs. NYU game had been in August. It had taken barely 3 months for him to almost destroy a perfect marriage. I drove around for most of the afternoon. I heard on the news that NYU had won. I hung out for a while longer before finally heading for home. I had a really bad feeling about going back. I stopped for gas at a station about 3 blocks away from my house. While I was at the pump, a friend of ours came over to me. "Rick, why weren't you at the party?" she asked me. "I wasn't there because it was a party for Knights fans. They could see their team in the Rose Bowl," I said. "I don't have much use for Knights." "Yet you married one," she said. I looked down. "You know she was miserable at her own party, right?" she said, making me feel even worse. "And that a-hole friend of hers was all over her as soon as you left." My heart lurched in my chest. "I go to all of the California State games," she said, "but I graduated from NYU. My husband was a Panther. We decided a long time ago that pride in your school is a good thing, but not at the expense of your family. Family always comes first. As soon as you grow up, you learn that there are a lot of things more important than which collection of buildings you got your degree from. Your spouse is more important, your kids are more important, your friends are more important. Hell, even your job is more important. After all, you went to the college just so you could get the career you wanted. The college you went to is really no more important than your high school or even your middle school. Yet you rarely hear about anyone getting angry because their husband or wife went to a different elementary school and doesn't recognize how cool Clark Elementary was." I thought about what she had said the whole time I was driving home. I decided then and there that the whole school thing was something we needed to grow out of. I loved Sophia with all of my heart and soul. From then on, anything that was important to her would be important to me. When I pulled into the driveway, the lights were off. I got out of my car and opened the door. I went up the stairs into our bedroom and saw 2 figures under the blankets on our bed. Carter was on top of Sophia, pumping his hips up and down. Suddenly, all I could see was rage. Carter was bigger than I was, but it didn't matter. He turned to me and smirked. I was across the room faster than a beam of light. I grabbed him with both of my hands around his neck and dragged him off the bed onto the floor. I slammed his head against the floor several times and punched him in the face at least 8 times before I realized that there were 4 people trying to pull me off of him. "Rick, stop," screamed someone. "You're going to kill him." It was a joke, nothing happened. As sanity slowly returned, I realized that I was surrounded by people. It didn't make sense. I also looked down at Carter. He was unconscious, fully dressed, and so was Sophia. She was looking at me in shock. "Someone call an ambulance," said one of the people behind us. "This was a really stupid thing to do," said someone else. "It was his idea," said another. The EMS truck arrived a few minutes later, followed closely by the police. Of course, there were questions about who did what and why. The amazing thing was that most of the people there tried to minimize what I had done while maximizing the reasons for it. Most of them claimed it was a misunderstanding over a joke gone bad. Finally, I just told the cops that I'd done it and they could take me into custody. The looks they gave me were extremely sympathetic. Sophia just looked as if she was still in shock. It was as if she realized for the first time that her joke would have far-reaching consequences. I was lucky, in a way. The Knights had saved me from a much worse fate because of the history of Knights fans doing stupid things following big games. The judicial systems all over the state had gotten into the habit of keeping judges and the courts in session for part of the night. The judge looked over the transcripts of my interview with the police and the interviews of the witnesses. He looked at the fact that I had no priors and no history of any type of law abuse. I didn't have so much as a traffic ticket on my record. I also owned my own home and had a job that I had worked at since the day I graduated from college. He set my bail at $10,000. I would only need 10% of that. Sophia showed up fresh from her interview with the police to pay it. I whispered to my court-appointed lawyer that I wouldn't accept bail from her. They put me in a cell until I could make bail. I got my lawyer to contact a few of my friends. "What's the problem?" asked my lawyer. "It's only $1,000. "I have the money, but I left my wallet in my car," I said. There's a funny thing about lawyers, they will take a case on the pure speculation of making money. They will take on clients who, like me, were clearly guilty on the off chance that reasonable circumstances for unreasonable behavior will exonerate them. But they will never risk their own money. So I sat in jail all night until I could get in touch with one of my coworkers to either go to my car and get the wallet or just loan me the money for a few hours. Meanwhile, Sophia asked to see me every hour around the clock. I refused, around the clock. When I did get home that morning, I grabbed everything I thought I would need for a couple of days and checked into a hotel. I got dressed and went to work. I explained everything to my boss, and he just shook his head. He'd been divorced twice, so he understood what I was going through. While I sat in jail, I realized that I had been too timid for too long. I had allowed Carter to dictate what happened and to come and go in our lives as he pleased. It was probably too late, but I decided to go on the attack. I hired a lawyer and had her begin drawing up divorce papers in case I couldn't save things. I also hired a PI firm to follow Carter. When I got back to the hotel that night, I changed into my running gear and went out for a run. All during the day, I had turned my phone off. I wasn't ready to deal with Sophia. She had left me so many messages that she had filled my voicemail box. When I got back from the run, she was sitting on my car. I walked right by. "Rick, why won't you talk to me?" she screamed. I turned and looked at her as calmly as I could. "When this is all over, the two of us will sit down and discuss where we go from here, if we go anywhere," I said. "What the hell does that mean?" she asked. "I hurt him pretty bad, sadly," I said. "I might go to jail. I might go for a long time. And you've got what you always wanted, you've got your Knight's boyfriend back. You're reunited with your first love. This way, I'll be out of your way." "What are you talking about?" she yelled. "Suddenly none of that is right. I'm a big boy, Sophia. I can handle it. I know that the two of you were together before I ever met you. Hell, you've been wearing his jersey since before I met you. I'm sure you've always wondered what would happen if the two of you got back together," I said. All of those old feelings came back in a hurry. "I won't stand in your way." "Good," she said. "I'm going to have you committed." do you know why last night happened? It happened for 2 reasons. The first is because you've been so jealous of Logan that you act irrationally around him. My husband, the man I loved so much that I want to spend the rest of my life with him, bailed on a party in our own home. The second is because I was so angry about you leaving that I got more than a little drunk and got talked into a really stupid joke that backfired and got someone hurt. Nathan, I love you, she continued. I can't believe that you would think I'd ever cheat on you with Carter, or anyone else. That's just another example of how crazy you've become. You don't think I have a reason to be crazy? I asked. No, you don't, she said. There are some things you need to know. I'm not as fond of Logan as you think, Nathan. I didn't end the relationship we had in college, he did. He dumped me because I wouldn't put out. He was a big shot on campus, and he told me that if I wouldn't give him sex, he'd find someone who would, and he'd find her before sundown. I wore Carter's jersey for the stupidest of reasons. I wanted a NYU jersey, and I already had one of his from before we broke up. I was just too cheap to buy another one. That made me smile, though I didn't want it to. I don't know why you're jealous of him, honey. He's jealous of you, that's probably why he does things the way he does. You turned me into your peanut butter as soon as we met. I looked at her in confusion. She had been moving closer to me with every word. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You know why I call myself your peanut butter?" I shook my head. "Because I spread so easily for you," she murmured, rubbing herself against me. "Nathan, can you please come home, baby? I'm going crazy without you," she whined. I just nodded my head. We didn't even make it home. We went into the motel to get my stuff so I could follow her home, and she ended up giving me a BJ in the motel room. Then we made love like deranged animals until we both collapsed after we climaxed. It took a few moments, and some cheers, before we realized that we had neglected to close the door to the motel room. A small crowd of strangers had just watched me and Sophia in the act. She just hugged me and told me that she was mine and didn't care who knew about it. For the next couple of days, things were back to normal, but there was a nagging little thought in the back of my head. Sophia and I were having sex almost constantly, which I didn't mind, but I wondered about the reason. "I came so close to losing you," she said. "I just realized that you can't take love for granted." The only thing I had hanging over my head was the court case. Carter had been out of the hospital for a few days, and we had 2 weeks left before I was due in court. My lawyer was sure that I would get probation and maybe anger management counseling, but if Carter dropped the charges, I could walk with a warning. My other lawyer wanted to know when I wanted the divorce papers served. I told her to forget about it because I no longer wanted to proceed. I also called the PI I had on Carter and asked them to forward the bill. "I think we should stay on this," the PI said. "Don't you want to hear what we got this morning?" Curious, I drove to his office, and he played a recording for me. The recording was a phone call. "When are you going to drop the charges?" asked a female voice that I recognized as Sophia's. "As soon as you give me another sample of that hot little night's action of yours," Carter said. "For God's sake, Logan, you've already screwed me 3 times, she said, "and that doesn't include the BJs you got during the game. I don't love you. Things are almost back to normal between my husband and me. It's time for you to ride off into the sunset, or at least to get the hell out of our lives. Fun is fun, but the game is over." "All right, I'll drop the charges after one more time," he said. "Why do we have to do it again?" asked Sophia. "I was your first boyfriend," he spat. "You gave him everything that I should have had. He got your cherry, you spread your legs for him like he belonged there. It should have been me." "He's my husband," she spat back. "Of course, I did. He gets it whenever he wants it. He loves me. He would never force me to do anything I don't want to do." "Good. That's what I want," he said. "As soon as we do that, I'll drop the charges." Okay. "Tomorrow," she said. "Lunchtime. You know the place. We'll go in separate cars. I don't want to spend any more time with you than I have to. But I won't be there unless you've dropped the charges. Call your lawyer and do that today. I don't trust you." I was shocked. Suddenly, all the pieces fit, and the nagging suspicion that I'd had finally made sense. I was supposedly the only man she'd ever been with, now I find out that she'd had sex with Carter at least 3 times. I was about to get up and leave, but the PI told me not to. He played me another recording, a phone call that had been recorded a few hours later than the first. After hearing the second call, I just picked up the disc containing the recordings and left the office. I had some phone calls of my own to make. I called Sophia and told her I needed her to come home early that day. I took her out to a movie and early dinner at our favorite restaurant. Then I took her home and made love to her. We fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms. I woke her up in the middle of the night and started again. "Honey, are you trying to screw me to death?" she asked. "I love you so much," I said. "And I can't afford to take love for granted either," I added, reminding her of what she'd said to me about a week earlier. Why did I have sex with her after I found out that she was cheating on me? There were 2 reasons. One was because I really did love her, and despite the fact that she had played me for a fool, what I was doing was going to break my heart. The second, and most important reason, was because I wanted her to remember what having someone love you with everything they had felt like. She went off to work smiling so hard she glowed, and barely able to walk. When I got to work that morning, my lawyer called me. He told me that there was no longer a case, Carter had dropped the charges. I was free. 3 hours later, I left the office. The PI called and told me where to go. I pulled into the parking lot of a really cheap motel that was roughly halfway between Sophia's job and our house. Obviously, she hadn't really put a lot of thought into what she was doing. I watched the 2 of them go into the motel room. "I'm giving you a new nickname," Carter said. "Your dumb husband calls you Sophia, but for me, you're going to be golf course. I'm going to be in every hole you have." I peeked through the window and watched as Sophia popped a handful of pills. "What are those?" he asked. "Painkillers," she said. "Nathan wore me out last night." "Well, don't worry, I'll be gentle," he began. "You've had that too, several times," she said. "Sucks to be you," he said. "You'd better take some more of those pills." I let them, or at least him, get really into what they were doing, and then I had the PI pick the lock. I walked into the room and pulled out a chair. When they noticed me, Sophia was squealing in pain, and Carter was, as he'd promised, screwing her. They both froze when they finally noticed me. They looked like cartoon characters, both of them with that deer-in-the-headlights expression on their faces. "Oh, don't mind me," I said. I looked at my watch. "You've probably got 3 or 4 more minutes before you're done." "Honey, it's not what it looks like," began Sophia. "That's good," I said. "It looks like knights are screwing you." "Well, it wasn't what it looked like," said Carter. He was trying to get off the bed and create as much distance between us as possible. "Carter, buddy," I said. "Oh, wait, you're afraid." "No worries, last time we spoke, I kicked your butt for pretending to screw Sophia. I put you in the hospital, didn't I?" He nodded and backed up further. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm doing things differently now. Jail was not a good experience. Besides, we have a lot in common. We have the same ex. She's your ex-girlfriend and my soon-to-be ex-wife." A young blonde woman walked in through the open door with a briefcase. She cracked her gum loudly and looked at a naked and cowering Sophia. "Are you Sophia Mitchell?" she asked. Yes," said Sophia. "You've been served," said the woman. She cracked her gum a couple more times and turned to Carter. He tried to back away with one hand in front of his face and the other on his crotch. "Are you Logan Carter?" she asked. He tried to speak. "Don't bother," she said. "I'll just leave this here." She cracked her gum a few more times and left the room. I turned to follow her, and Sophia started screaming as she came after me, still naked. "I did it for us, Nathan," she screamed. I pulled away and left her jumping up and down, yelling in the motel room doorway. Over the next few days, we did what everyone in our situation would do. Carter went around complaining about how the alienation of affection suit and the conduct leading to dissolution of marriage suits were unfair. He also told everyone he could that he was going to kick my butt the next time he saw me. Seeing me, of course, would be impossible since he never left his apartment. Sophia stalked me and filled up my voicemail box. She swore that she could explain it all if only I would listen to her. She demanded that we go to counseling and swore that she would never give up on our marriage and that Carter meant nothing to her. She told everyone she knew that she would die for me, hoping that if she told enough people, one or two of them would tell me. My reaction to her heart-rending display of emotion was equally poignant. I modified my Phantom XT and played video games. Our lawyers met and argued, postulated, and filed motions, charging us more than the GDP of several small countries in the process. Lawyers have an amazing talent for sensing exactly how much money their clients have. It's one of the reasons that if two poor people get a divorce, it's usually over in a couple of weeks. People like Sophia and I usually take a few months, and the rich can be tied up in divorce court for years. After I'd installed a new tuner, new exhaust system, and several cosmetic mods on my car, I was bored. I called my lawyer and asked him what was holding the divorce up. It was, after all, simple math. I made slightly more than Sophia did, but we'd only been married for 5 years. We were 4 years into a 30-year mortgage, and we had no kids. My offer was to let her have the house and the payments on it. Our equity in the house should balance out any difference in salary, so no alimony would be given. We would both walk away and start over. The problem was Sophia. She was like a bad penny that refused to go away. I called her and asked what the problem was. "I just want us to talk, honey," she said. "We were married for 5 years, and you never bothered to tell me that you were going to cheat on me, so I can't imagine what you want to say now," I said. "So meet me in the park outside our old apartment in 20 minutes. "I'll be there," she said. "I'll bring the blanket." "Just bring the papers," I said, "and sign them." First, no papers, no talk. The two of us sitting on a bench in the middle of winter is insane. This is Colorado. Winter here is almost as cold as Alaska. And it's worse because Alaska is dark most of the time, but in Colorado, it's always light enough to see how cold it is. Early in our relationship, Sophia and I would go to the park to talk out our disagreements. We would never leave the park until we had solved our problems. Sometimes the blanket was the only thing that kept us from freezing to death. I met her in the park, and she hadn't worn a jacket. She had the blanket with her. "Hi, honey. I missed you," she said. "Where are the papers?" I asked. She handed them to me. I looked for her signature, and once I saw it, I was satisfied. "What's all this crap around the signature?" I asked. "Only my tears," she said. She pointed to the blanket, and we sat down. "I had to have sex with him," she said. "I did it for us. It was the only way I could get him to drop the charges. I couldn't let you go to jail because of that stupid joke. I just couldn't. I'd go crazy if you were away from me for that long. So you only screwed him the one time?" I asked, "just to keep me out of jail?" "Of course, honey. I love you," she cried. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "For God's sake, Logan, you've already screwed me 3 times, came out of the phone. Her eyes grew wide as she heard her own voice. The next time I saw Sophia was at the final meeting of our lawyers. The papers would be sent out to be rubber-stamped by the court, and then 3 months later, I'd be a free man. Sophia seemed really broken up by the whole thing. I felt bad about it until I noticed who was waiting for her in her car. Who better to cheer her up than her old night's buddy, Carter? I just smiled and spent the next 3 months waiting and working on getting her out of my system. The settlement was locked in, so I didn't really have to wait the full 3 months. But I did anyway, just to make sure. On day 89, I decided to give my old friend and fellow Panther, Olivia, a heads up. I told her that I was probably going to be suing her company because 2 of their employees had an affair that ruined my marriage. I also told her that Sophia had even gotten her lover a job with their company just so they could spend more time together. I told her the papers would probably be served the next day. She asked me to hang out in her office for a while until she could talk to some people. While she was out of the office, Sophia came in. "How are you doing, honey?" she asked. "I miss you." "I miss you too," I said. "At least you've got Carter." "I have no one." "I'd be willing to, she said. "You could call it revenge against Carter." "No thanks," I said. "I'm not a cheater. Someday I'll find someone who loves me, and it will be magic, like we were." She sobbed, and I just nodded. "What are you doing here anyway?" I asked, besides making me wish with all my heart that none of this had ever happened. On your worst day, you made me happier than all his best days put together, she cried. Just doing a favor for a fellow Panther, I said. 10 minutes later, Olivia was back. She brought a woman from HR and one of the company's lawyers with her. What do you want, Mr. Anderson? The lawyer asked. I want $1 million, I said. Would you settle for $6,000 in cash and are terminating both of the offending parties with prejudice? They will be given no recommendations, no severance packages, and several of our more influential board members will make sure that neither of them works in their chosen field in this area again. Deal, I said. Would you like to watch? He asked. Hell yeah, I said. 10 minutes later, I was sitting next to Olivia's desk as Carter came in. I had thought he was a sales agent like Sophia, but he was actually a custodian. He was even carrying a push broom. He walked into the office, and the woman from HR told him he was fired. He looked over at me and started whining. A voice deeper than my exhaust system rumbled from the biggest human being I had ever seen. Hit the bricks, buddy, he said, before I shove that broom up your butt sideways. Carter ran out of the office like his life depended on it. Then they called Sophia into the office. 2 days later, I called Sophia and asked her for a meeting. We met in the park as usual. She brought the blanket, as usual. We wrapped ourselves in the blanket and cuddled. Okay, Nathan, she said. You won. You got me fired, and I can't seem to find another job. Actually, I lost, I told her. I lost the woman I loved more than anything, and I lost her to a total a-hole. I wish more than anything else that this had never happened. But I tried to warn you from the beginning. No, Nathan, there was never any danger until you started walking away and leaving me with him, she said. When you left the party, I was so pissed that I couldn't stand it. I wanted to lash out, and I intended to curse you out when you got back. But I ended up so drunk that I went down into the basement with Logan. It was awful. But after that, he started telling me that if I didn't do it again, he'd make sure that I lost you. So he blackmailed me into doing it again and again. I guess he wanted me so much that he was willing to do anything to get me. Yeah, you're right about that, I said. All I could do was love you. I was honest about it, no games, no trickery. I just gave you my heart. And that's all I ever wanted, she said. Can't we try again? It's too late for us, Sophia, I said. I could never trust you again. Every time I see you, I would see him with you. That wouldn't be good for either of us. But before we go our separate ways, I have something for you. I pulled out my phone and emailed her a file. She started listening to it even as I walked away. It was the second phone call that the PI had recorded. Yeah, dude, what's up, said a voice. Nothing much, replied Carter. I finally nailed that Sophia chick from back at NYU. Oh, man. How was it? Asked the voice. It wasn't even any good, said Carter. She's one of those thin, cute girls, not much sex. The only thing sweet about it was getting my revenge by screwing up her life. What a skank. She was married. Yeah, she married a California State guy. Holy, you hate California State, don't you? Asked the voice. Not nearly as much as I hate NYU's, spat Carter. But you're a NYU, said the voice. No, I'm not, said Carter. I never graduated. When I got hurt, I lost my scholarship, and they kicked me out. As long as I could play, I was golden. But when I wasn't useful, NYU cut me loose. I do everything I can to take those idiots down, and Sophia was just another skank who fell for it. The recording ended as I walked away, and I didn't look back. So that's my story, Mr. Collins. I was miserable for about a year after the divorce, and then I met Amelia. She's as different from Sophia as possible, she's shorter, has beautiful dark hair, and a smile that lights up a room. She's got a confidence and kindness that made me realize how much better love could feel. After everything, I finally felt at peace. What school did she go to? Mr. Collins asked. She didn't go to college, I replied, smiling. After high school, she went to a cosmetology program and got her state certificate. She worked really hard, and now she owns that beauty shop right there. I pointed to the shop across the street. Just then, the door opened, and Amelia stepped out. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, nothing flashy, but she looked amazing as always. She glanced over and waved, her whole face lighting up when she saw me. "Oh, so you guys aren't watching the game?" Mr. Collins asked. "Nah, we don't really follow college basketball," I said, grinning. "But we will be watching the Eagles tomorrow. Got some snacks in the back seat and everything. Some traditions don't die, huh?" "Are you still having those parties?" he asked. "Oh, yeah," I said. "And we still make bets on the scoring plays. But now it's just the two of us, no big party, no basement trips, and definitely no exes lurking around." "Just the two of you?" he asked, a bit confused. "Yep. Just me," I said, pointing at myself, then at Amelia, and finally rubbing her tummy gently. "And one on the way." Mr. Collins chuckled and nodded approvingly as I pulled away with a small chirp from my Dominator's rear tires. In the rearview mirror, I noticed a tall, thin woman with short brown hair watching us from the bar across the street. It was Sophia. She looked thinner than I remembered, with a sadness that hadn't been there before. As Amelia and I drove off, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. For years, I'd been angry and hurt, letting that pain define me. But as I looked over at Amelia, smiling and talking about our plans for the baby, I felt something else, gratitude. I was finally free, and my future was wide open. Sophia's final thought, as I later learned, was much more bittersweet. As I watched the game in the bar, I thought I had seen my ex-husband, Nathan. I live alone now and had started dating again, but nothing seems to click. Maybe I was fooling myself, hoping I'd find the kind of love I once had with Nathan. But all I seem to find are men who want something temporary or lack the depth that Nathan had. I heard the rumble of a high-powered engine and looked outside, half expecting to see his old blue Dominator. Instead, it was sleek and black, almost like it had moved on just like he had. And then I saw him, laughing with a woman who looked at him the way I used to. She rubbed her belly, and the way he looked at her, I knew what it meant. I had lost him for good. He was going to be a father, and there was no way he would leave her. I realized I'd lost something I'd never truly valued until it was gone. If only I had listened to him back then, we'd still be together, and it would be my baby he was doting on. Now, all I can do is hope that someday I find something even half as good. As Nathan drove away, I felt a pang of regret so deep it left me numb. "Are you okay?" my date asked, noticing the tears on my cheeks. "I think I'm going to head home," I replied. "But honey, the Spartans are winning," he whined. "I told you not to call me honey," I snapped, already feeling irritated. "My name is Sophia. Are you dating so many women that you can't remember it? Or maybe you don't know what love really looks like. Why don't you stay and watch the game?" he protested. "I'm leaving," I said firmly. "But we're winning," he said, still clueless. "Who's we?" I asked coldly. "Are you on the team? Did you ever even play football? It's college basketball, we're adults now, and some of us moved on a long time ago." I walked out of the bar alone, wondering if I would ever find peace the way he had. Thanks for watching. Did Nathan make the right choice? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.